We are already starting a bit late, so I won't spend more time. We welcome, please, Jen Krieger, who is going to ask you, so you want to be a DevOps engineer. Jen, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jen Krieger, and I am an Agile coach at Red Hat. I work with the Project Atomic and OpenShift Origin teams. So I work with, I would say, on average, approximately 150 engineers. And surrounding those engineers is about 300 other support people, documentation, QE, product management, pretty much anything you name it. So we have a very large team. Before we get started, last year was one of the first times I talked at a conference in a large audience. I'd done a lot of talking before then, but it was mostly smaller groups. So last year I got what I could imagine would be the best conference feedback that I have ever received in my life, and hopefully it will be the best that I've ever received, but I'm challenging you all to do better. And so some constraints. The talk feedback I got last year was, and I quote, "Your talk was poop." So here's my challenge to you all. I would love to know if you've ever gotten a piece of feedback in your life that has either hurt your feelings or has demoralized you or has made you rethink something in your life that you were pretty passionate about. And I challenge you all to, when you get your feedback rating thing after this talk, to tell me what you thought about this talk, but also share that feedback with me. It will be a point of reference that I'll be able to use in future talks. So I'd love that feedback. And caution. This is a talk about DevOps, but it is not a talk about tooling, technology, or any of the things that I've referenced in the very beginning of my conference description. So if you were here to listen to me talk about Chef or OpenShift or any of the other things that you love about automation tooling, I welcome you to exit now, because I am not actually going to talk about any of those things. I'm actually going to talk about the darker side of DevOps, which is the human side of DevOps, the evil Darth Vader side of DevOps. Basically, the how do we work well together part of DevOps. So come with me on a fun ride. I wasn't always in information technology. I actually started my career as a financial analyst at a very but small wealthy company in Miami. And I worked on Miami Beach, and I tried to get a closer picture, but this was the only one I could find. My office was almost directly on the Atlantic Ocean, and my office window overlooked the beach. So I had this view all day long. And you would think that I'd be out on the sand every day. That's not actually what happened. I spent a crazy amount of time in, and I know, Excel spreadsheets, basically doing what I could only call is the most manual process that I've ever done in my life. I would download spreadsheets from banks or files from banks, and I would hand type the numbers into my spreadsheet, and I would visually compare based on the information that I was receiving in different places. And I also knew that we were downloading what at the time was what I thought a very large amount of data on a nightly basis from a financial firm that would allow us to fact check what these companies were telling us. And I would do this visual manual process, and I would type here and I would type there and I would compare and I would make sure that we were getting paid the money that we were supposed to get. And as you can imagine, it was a very time-consuming and often error-prone activity. So I was thinking, it would be really great if I could just query the download that we would get on a nightly basis instead of having to type it into the spreadsheet. So I came up with this massive plan, and I wrote all this information. I did all this cost analysis because I was a financial analyst. So I said, we're going to save X amount of dollars, and it's going to be tremendous, because I thought I could save 50 working hours a week, or a month, or a week, depending on how much you actually worked at that point. But and there was a team of 25 of us, so I was thinking, gosh, we'd save a lot of money. And so I wrote this proposal, and I took it to the IT department, and I was thinking to myself that I was absolutely the most awesome person on the planet, because I had this idea that it was going to save us so much money. And this was back in the day before I understood what a production database was. I didn't have any concept whatsoever about the idea of a user writing a query and querying a production database and what that would look like. But I sure tell you, my IT department knew. And I kind of kicked off this, what I can only imagine was a terrible, like, 6-month-long process in which our IT department argued with our business folks violently over whether or not we were going to get access to query the production database. And via this process, what I wound up doing is spending a lot of time with these guys in IT and explaining why I needed what I needed and what I was going to get out of what I needed. And somehow I was able to bridge the gap between what the tech folks were wanting and what the business folks were wanting, and being able to communicate that back and forth. So what that gave me was basically an answer which was no. They said no. At the end of the day, there was no way that they were going to give a user like me, who had no idea what a production database meant, access to query. There's just no way. But two things cool happened out of that situation. I got my first job in IT, and it was something that I had wanted to do for a really long time, but I had no idea how to actually get there. So this was a perfect opportunity for me to move over there. So I became the dubious role of business analyst / project manager, and I was the one who would somehow bridge the gap between our tech folks and the business folks, because apparently they weren't able to talk to one another. And then also, too, I was exposed to the real reason why they said no. And so I started to understand a little bit more about what was going on the IT side of things, which was basically, and let me just boil this down for you, we really didn't have a whole lot of money back in those days to essentially make things right. We were kind of like running on one server, and we were serving this custom-built application to 500 different users, and all of our servers were in our server room in our building on Miami Beach. And this is the place, just for reference, that got hit by Hurricane Katrina. So think about that. During Hurricane Katrina, our building was actually closed for 10 days because we had no power, no drinking water. So the city of Miami closed the entire building down. And so we had no access to any of the information that we had in that building. So we really, as a company, didn't really understand the best practices. So they were terrified that I would write a query and hang the production database and put 500 people essentially out of the ability to work, because everything was done via this application. So what winded up happening in this space is that we spent a good amount of time basically talking about how much it would take to replicate what it was that I wanted to do within the UI of this application. And we wrote up, a business case and all that 9 yards. And it boiled down to the fact that it was going to take us like a year of development to put this in the UI and get everybody what it was that I wanted to do. And the amount of money and time it would have taken us to actually develop it didn't really offset the cost savings. And so there was like, kind of a table flip moment, because we were like, how is it possible that this simple thing that I wanted to do is going to take that much time and effort? And so the director at the time was very frustrated with us, because she's like, why can't you just do a little bit at a time? Or can we try to figure out a different way to do this? And I say this flippantly, but I'm pretty sure she knew a little bit better than I did at the time. I'm assuming she went to some sort of executive meeting in which they were all talking about this new thing that everybody was learning about. And she thought it would be a great idea for us to try it out. So you guys may have heard this, agile software development. And so she came to us and she said, we're going to do agile. And we were all like, what is this thing that you're talking about? And she was like, well, look it up. Let me know what you think. And then she went out and spent a tremendous amount of money to send us to what I would say is like Agile 101 training, where we went for 3 days, and this guy came in and we learned about Scrum, and we learned about all that stuff and how to do it perfectly. And because we're all IT folks, we wanted to do it perfectly. So this kicked off what I could only say was 2 years of hell. It was the worst 2 years of my career. We were arguing all the time about the correct way to do it. We were arguing about requirements. We were arguing about literally anything that you could argue about. And I kid you not, somebody actually got fired over one of the arguments. That was how bad it was. So while we were really doing Scrum exactly the way that the framework said to do it, we failed in a big bad way to even remotely address the idea that there was all this other stuff going on behind it, the communication, the collaboration, the working well together, all that good stuff to that essentially makes Agile what it is today. And so when we went to this training, we were just hearing what we wanted to hear as individuals. The engineers wanted more access to the customers because they felt that business analysts were getting in the way of getting better requirements. So they were, clearly is your fault that we're not getting the requirements that we need so that we're building the right tool for our customers. And the business analysts were saying it's better to have engineers involved earlier because they're always asking questions that we never thought about. So having them in the mix sooner than later will get us better requirements or better questions answered, or we'll get the answers to the things that we know are coming that we can't think of ourselves. And at that time, I had transitioned officially into the full project manager role. So I just thought, heck, if I know what everybody's doing at every minute of the day, this will actually be able to give me some data to figure out why no one was getting anything done. So I'm going to tell a little story here. I'll call him Business Guy Joe. Business Guy Joe and I had worked together at that point for about 7 years. And I knew Business Guy Joe had some, I guess tics that would tell me when he was getting a little frustrated with me or frustrated with the conversation. He would do a few things. When he was not happy, sitting, he would always lean forward when he was first having the conversation. But when he was not happy, he would start leaning backwards in his seat. And he would kind of distance himself from the person that he was talking to. And then if it escalated, he would, do one of these. And he would lean even further back. And then this is the best one. It was the BlackBerry on the table. When he was really mad, he would do one of these. And he would just pick it up and he would look at it. And I don't think he actually ever looked at anything on there. He was just almost like signaling that he was done with the conversation. So he was like, forget it, I'm done. And so I had learned to pick these tics up and know when to aggressively ask him questions or know when to pull back from the conversation. So when we injected the engineers into conversations with him, basically what happened is they picked up on none of those tics. And actually it escalated into, like almost immediately, into one of the greatest arguments of all time in my career, which was the guy saying, I'm the business person, this is my product, and I want this thing on the screen. And I don't care about, we were talking about a text box on the screen, okay? Just to be clear. So the engineers were like, what do you want in that text box? Is there information somewhere on a different screen that you can use? Should it be on this box? Because maybe you don't need to, maybe it needs to be on this screen versus this screen. How many characters are going to be in that text box? Should it be a number, or do you actually want to type? What are your reporting plans on this text box? You guys probably have other questions pending in your head about what am I going to do with this text box? So business guy was like, I don't care. Just don't care, just give me a text box so I can type. I don't care what you're gonna do with it after the fact, just put it on the damn screen. And so when he was like, just do what I said, you can imagine the reaction on the other side of the table, which was, how dare you tell me what to do with my product? This is my baby. This is not your job to tell me how to do it. You're supposed to tell me what problem you have, and I'm gonna come up with a solution. That's Agile. And I was like, whoa. And so these gaps in communication caused tremendous friction as the 2 years went on, as you can see why I had a hellish period of my career. And instead of me viewing this as a way for me to think about my career differently, like I actually viewed Agile as very threatening because I thought it was going to essentially eliminate my job eventually. Like I thought engineers would take over the world and I would need to learn how to code and oh God, what am I going to do? So generally I thought, there's no way that long-term project managers are going to be needed or business analysts are going to be needed in the role of software. So I was very threatened by this. But what I failed to realize was instead of viewing my changing role as a threat, what I could have done is view it as an opportunity to teach the other people around me what I knew about Business Guy Joe and what I knew about his body language and how to effectively communicate in a way that other people could actually hear what you were saying. So the 4 soft skills, and in case you weren't wondering, I am referring to soft skills, and soft skills if you would, that I think you all need to be excellent at in order to self-profess yourselves as quote-unquote DevOps engineers, are communication, collaboration, the ability to resolve conflict, and compromise. So we're going to talk about these in terms of actual examples so you guys can have a reference and we'll see what you guys think. So So number one, communication. So this is open source land, and communication isn't something that we have often time to actually be face-to-face with people, but there's a lot of different forms of communication. There's email, IRC. If you're old school, there's, forums if you so desire. Whatever you want to do, there's other types of communication instead of face-to-face. The only thing that you need to know is that you need to be able to express your ideas calmly and concisely. And you need to be able to read people, because there is a heck of a lot of nuance in the way that people are perceiving. So like, I know that if I look across the room, I can see who is actively paying attention and who might be coding. So you guys will know. Also, too, I will also mention that when I am working with my teams, I absolutely know when they're not paying attention. And so I call them on it all the time. So everybody's smiling because I think I caught some people coding. That's okay. It's okay. It's fine. Go ahead and code. Just code on Project Atomic so that we get some love. So do you guys ever have that manager who might have come up to you in the past in your career and was like, we have the most important project of all time, and it is the most important thing that we'll ever do, and it must be done by this date? Anybody? Raise your hand. Anybody? Come on. No one? Come on. Seriously. And until we get to that deadline, everybody is going to work weekends. Yeah? Raise hands. Again? No? No one ever had to work weekends? I have, twice. Maybe more than twice. So I've heard it too, and I've actually, on a frequent basis, although not so much at Red Hat, which is nice, have had to coach people on how to talk to their management about the idea of weekend working. So this is a very, very challenging thing to do, right? So you've got your boss, and they're responsible for your performance. They might be responsible for allocating your bonus. They are responsible for things that are mysterious, like promotion and long-term career goals and all those things that you're kind of like, how did they do that? So it could be quite intimidating to go up to them and say something like, you know what? I am not coming in on a Saturday. How dare you even ask, right? But I will say, there is an acceptable way of doing this, and there is an unacceptable way of doing this. There is the acceptable way, which I tend to tell people to do, which is, manager, I have a very active social life. I don't know, make up an excuse. I have a new child. I have ailing mother. Whatever you want to say, it could be a complete nonsense. I am a very active ballroom dancer, and I have a competition coming up, and my partner is depending on me. Whatever you want to make up, right? And it is very important to me to have that good work-life balance. So I understand that we have this commitment to work on this project, and we have to be done by this date. But is it perhaps possible that I might be able to work 10-hour days, 5 days in a row, instead of coming in on a Saturday? And you open the communication to remind your boss that you are indeed human. And whether or not you are successful in reminding your boss that you are human is a big question mark. But I will say that what it does is it puts the direct emphasis and also responsibility back on your manager to remind them, again, that you're human and that empathy is a big part of communication. So the unacceptable way to do this is to just not show up. Okay? And the reason why I say that is because I guarantee you have a team of people who are also going to show up on that Saturday who probably aren't as outspoken as you may be, who are not going to say anything to their manager, but who are also going to be like, so if you don't show up and there is no conversation had about why you're not there, they might actually not be okay with that. So it's not just the conversation that you're having with your manager, it's also the coworkers around you who might be perceiving your actions in a way that you really don't want them to. So by show of hands, how many of you think I'm an extrovert? Outspoken, gregarious, likes to talk to people? I'm not. I'm so far from an extrovert that sometimes it actually hurts. It actually hurts me to be here. I'm sorry, it does. It actually puts me so outside of my comfort zone that, but I will say that that's part of what I do for a living, so that's why I'm standing in front of you. And this leads us to soft skill number 2, which is collaboration. So you have to work together to get things done, right? Everybody knows that. And in order for you not to make yourself be a bottleneck, essentially, right? So if you're the only person who knows this code, or you're the only person who has to push something in production, or you're the only person, you become that self-professed bottleneck so that you basically, you can't be that person. You just can't. And it's partly because you cannot be the hero if you want to claim yourself as a DevOps engineer. You have to work well with others, and you have to share the information that you know. So as a DevOps engineer, it is, and you can repeat after me, it's no longer okay to say, so-and-so will figure that out. You need to actually, like if somebody says, I have a question, you don't know the answer to that question, you need to actually go out and see if you can help that person answer that question. Or maybe you don't have to go and find the answer for them, but maybe you give them information, or, okay, I don't really know anything about that, but I think this person over here may know something, so go talk to them, or, I think I saw something in the code base over here, so maybe you want to check over there. But it's not really like, don't even talk to me. That's not really a thing. So going back to the conversation of extroversion, I think when I was reading about this topic, and just in case you guys weren't aware, the software industry has moved to the idea that collaboration is the only way to get your work done. Anybody not aware of that? Because that is the case. In fact, I recently was talking to I have a very broad network of Agile folks in the Raleigh, North Carolina area that I talk to on a regular basis, and I was asking them questions. And about 75% of all the people who work as Agilists in the Triangle area are doing some method of Agile software development. So they're pushing very heavily on the idea that you must work with the people around you. But on the other hand, I also know that the majority of everybody in this room is probably more on the introverted side of things. They're more interested in, I love this little pop-up window, this is, by the way, not my laptop. So if there's anybody saying anything on that pop-up window, it's not me. Or if you can read check and they're saying something crazy, it's him right there. So in any case, the majority of people are introverts, and when I am talking about software collaboration and getting together to talk things through, I'm thinking you're probably thinking that I think this is the way software engineering should work. So as I was saying earlier, I don't think that collaboration always has to be face-to-face. In fact, I think that that's actually pretty much not a thing with the majority of engineers that I've worked with in the past. I consider, and I frequently tell people that IRC, email, GitHub, checking your code, doing code review, all those things that you guys are doing on a regular basis is a form of collaboration and should be, baked more, do it more, have more feedback, do all those things, because that allows you to actually work with your coworkers or with your open source community. You don't have to stand around a table with a tie on, laughing, and I think, is that President Obama there in the center? I don't even know. It looks like him, right? In any case, so you can use those tools like GitHub to communicate with the people around you and get more information or share information that you might have. So one of the things, though, is that even though I am actively pushing extroversion as a method of getting things done, and I also am an introvert myself, these are my tips that I use with my teams to make sure that we don't have introverts table flipping at the end of every week because they can't handle it anymore. So I advocate for meetings to be grouped together, all in one day. So for those of you who are familiar with Scrum, there are these things called ceremonies in which we have all these meetings that we have to attend, and everybody's like, So one of the things that I learned very early on in software development is when I thought, I would look at everybody's calendar and I would see, well, they had a meeting in the morning, and I'll give them a break for an hour, and then I'll schedule something after that. I actually did not know that that was a bad thing to do. I was thinking I was giving you guys a break, and then we'd go back into the meeting. But in reality, what was happening was an hour was just not enough time to dig into what you were going to do and to actually get work done. So what I do now is I advocate for 4-hour blocks of time, or if possible, 2 days a week where folks have no meetings at all. And I also tell people that if they're getting invited to meetings where they're not really sure what the agenda is or why they're being invited, they can feel free to decline the meeting, as long as if the person follows up and says, why did you decline? I really need you there because of these reasons. You don't ignore them. You actually interact and say, okay, well, maybe I can try to be there. So, like I said, advocate for meetings to be grouped together, and this is something that I am empowering you all to do with the folks who are scheduling you for meetings. Advocate at least 1 or 2 days where you are meeting free, and that includes that 15-minute stand-up. So if you have one, say, can we just do 1 day a week or 2 days a week where we're not actually talking to each other? And this allows you to get focused on things that, focus to get things done. And also, too, by the way, if you are a company where you have some work from home and some in the office, the work from home days are a perfect day where you don't have to do any meetings. Yeah, 2 thumbs up. And then also, and the most important thing, if you are from the New England area, like I myself are in the United States, you tend to do something where you're talking faster and faster and faster and faster and faster when you're actually having a conversation with somebody. The biggest thing you can do for introverts and the people who do a lot more thinking in their head than thinking with their mouths is to slow down when you're talking and pause or restate something that somebody has said. So, I understand you said this. Is that correct? And so I have actually, the last team I worked with in my IT department had 3, I would say, moderately extroverted people and 1 person who was so introverted that I could barely get him to talk sometimes. And so what would happen in this situation is my 3 extroverts would be like 9 miles down the road talking about all these things, and there was all these decisions that they made before they had reached that point down the road. And the introvert was standing over here going, I'm still thinking about this decision you made over here, and I read like 18 different things, and I also looked at the code while you guys were talking, and I think maybe this decision was wrong. And so can we talk about it again? And all the decisions that they had made before this decision predicated on the fact that this decision was correct. And so, as you can imagine, this created a lot of conflict. So the way that we resolved it as a team is we slowed down. We restated things. We took breaks in meetings so that we could think a little bit more. So do yourself a favor and do that for other people in the room. So doing these things can hopefully reduce the pressure on everybody who feels very put out because they're introverts and they're being asked to be extroverts at work. So soft skill number 3, the ability to resolve conflict. So let's face it, change is really scary. So I don't know if you guys have ever had to do something where somebody has asked you to not use a tool or not do a thing or look at a different programming language or do agile software development, and you've never done it before, and you're thinking, gosh, do I really want to learn something new? I kind of have been doing this for X million years. When my director said agile software development, like I said, I was really threatened, and it was very, very scary for me to think about how that was going to change what my job was, and I would have to learn all those things. So you need to understand that, and you also need to understand that people's reactions to that change are going to be extreme. So if you can manage your reaction to their reaction, you'll be better off for it. So I was sitting in a room a couple years ago, and I'm going to tell the story really quick. The engineers were arguing about whether they were going to use Puppet or Ansible. Anybody been there? Puppet, Ansible, or Chef? Yeah. And they were having a very civil conversation initially, but then a third engineer joined the conversation and it escalated very quickly. And I was sitting over going, I don't really know what you guys are talking about right now. I mean, I knew what they were talking about, but I was like, I don't really care what you're talking about. But then they turned to me and said, well, what do you think? And I was like, both tools, like all tools, have pros and cons. And I really, what is better for you guys? Like, what do you actually want to use? You are the experts. Please just tell me. And they continued to argue about it, and they continued to demand my opinion. And I was like, well, I guess I can, pick a name out of a hat, and that's how we'll select the tool that will be everything that we do in IT for the next 8 years. But I didn't feel comfortable for that. So I had sitting there, and I actually lost my temper with them. I said, oh gosh, could you just stop talking about this topic? Because it went on for weeks. It wasn't just like an hour meeting, guys. And so I had this shining moment of realization where I just didn't care anymore. And so why would I say this to a bunch of technical people at a tech conference? And so here is the single most important thing here, is know your audience. If you are ranting about a tech thing to a business person, or you're ranting about a tech person to somebody, like my husband rants about storage stuff all the time, and I Sorry, hun. So they were trying to convince me about this, and I really did not care. So the way I de-escalated the situation is I stepped back from them and I said, hey guys, okay, time out. Let's make a list of all the pros and cons on the whiteboard, and I made them do all the pros and cons on the whiteboard, and we talked through them. I restated their opinions. I tried to interject when the voices started escalating, and I did one thing, which is another most important tip. When I was restating opinions, I restated them wrong. So that might kind of blow your mind, but I just kind of tweaked it a little bit and added something in there that I knew was not quite accurate, but what that did was it got the brain, I don't know, you guys are like, oh my God, you did that, what do you mean? But what I mean is, I said, chef is this, and I think it can do this. And they're like, oh, no, let me explain it to you. It actually does this, and this is this, and this is this, and this is this. And what that actually did for everybody in the room is it kind of brought the tension from here down to here, because they had to restate calmer so that I would understand. So it is a technique that you could choose to employ if you feel comfortable enough about your confidence level about what you know about technology. I really am okay, confidence-wise, to state something wrong, and I'm okay with it if somebody thinks I'm dumb because I stated it wrong, because I'm getting what I want out of the conversation. So, by the way, does anybody want to know what my opinion is now after saying I don't care about Chef, Ansible, or Puppet at tech conferences? Because I'll tell you, you guys will probably corner me in the hallway and tell me why Chef is better than Ansible, right? So this is now my opinion. Oh, I deleted, here, that's my opinion. I still don't care. So let me tell you how you can let me tell you how you can actually change people's opinions. So how to convince others that your opinion is right. This is my magic sauce. Stop. So if somebody is arguing with you and you're compelled to argue back with them, the best thing you can do is just stop. That's the age-old count to 100 thing, right? Then listen to what they're saying. And I don't mean a listen. I mean listen to what they're saying. Ask them questions. Say, okay, I heard you say this. Is that what you meant? And give them a chance to restate or re-clarify or add more information to what it is that they're trying to say. And so here is the most important part about asking questions. You may actually get them to think about what it is that they're saying by restating. Like they might say something like, well, I was thinking you could do this. Oh, wait a minute. I think I'm actually going to get stuck here, so maybe we need to do it this way. And they may actually talk themselves into what you were going to argue with them about to begin with by just letting them restate it out loud a second time. Slow down, let them think it through. Sometimes people talk with their mouths and they're thinking with their mouths. And then two, by listening to their answers, maybe they'll have the ability to change the way that you're perceiving the technology to be. So like I said, ask questions and really listen. And then finally, compromise. So you cannot have things your way all the time. And you must learn to choose when your battles are to be fought versus when they're not to be fought. So you must learn to compromise. And you also need to know when to let go. So my girlfriend wanted a cat, but I didn't want a cat, so we compromised and we got a cat. Yeah. So you're not going to be able to, change everybody's mind all the time, and you basically need to be okay with that. And please don't argue until you are mortal enemies, because that is not going to help you out at all. And this is my final point of wisdom. You don't need to attend every argument that you're invited to. I frequently get inflammatory emails all the time from people, or hallway conversations, or IRC, like, this is stupid, we're not going to do that. I choose not to answer a lot of it, because to me, answering it incites the ability, or opens the debate. And just by not saying anything doesn't mean that I actually agree with that person. It just means that I haven't answered yet. So if you've ever gotten that thing where you've sent an email and about a month later they've responded to you with the information that you're waiting for, I view that as a method of conflict resolution, because eventually that person will they either really need to have me know their opinion, so they'll find me and they'll probably want to have a face-to-face conversation with me, which I think is so much better than email, or they'll call me on the phone or whatever. But if they're really, really passionate about what they're saying and they really want to change my mind, they will follow up. So I wait for them to come to me. So if you are ever in a situation where you are sitting down to write a very inflammatory IRC message, or I'm going to tell somebody, you suck because your code sucks and all this stuff, what I am going to tell you is that it is not okay to do that. The best thing that you have in your arsenal of tools as engineers is the ability to disconnect from your keyboard and the ability to step away from what it is that you are in the moment doing. So just disconnect, take a break, go get coffee, go get water, whatever, and then come back and then respond. Or wait a night. Waiting a night typically works for me. Or I write the email I want to write, and then I step away from my computer, and then a couple hours later I come back and I go, oh my God, if I sent that, I'd be a real jerk. So that's another tip. So as long as you commit to trying to practice all these ideas, I think that you could, as an individual, get to where you need to be in terms of communication. So here's homework. So these are the things you need to practice. Expressing your opinions concisely and calmly. Pay attention to body language. Collaboration doesn't always have to be face-to-face, so use all the tools in your arsenal. You don't have to be right every time, and most importantly, don't attend every argument that you're invited to. So this is the point in the man pages where we show examples. So I'm going to encourage you all to tell me a situation that you have experienced in the past where you have been in a bad situation and you probably have not responded well. And we'll talk about what you could have done better. Is there anybody? And I am handing out these glorious Define the Future 2016 DevConf scarves as, and I, for those of you who came in late, they're very warm.
Yeah, we're going to pass the mic to the one guy or one brave enough to share.
Anybody?
So hi. I'm DevOps Engineer. So, and I don't have the situation you wanted to me, but I have a question for you.
Sure.
I was in this situation not long ago that I had to point some design flaws in some application, and I had to tell it to the architect. So I told him that there are some flaws and so on. They were like quite fatal flaws, so the application would do some bad things. So, and he was like, okay, whatever. So I gathered some evidence and then came another time to him and so on and showed him that yes, this is a big problem. He was like, okay, we have to change it and so on. I had the solution already, whatever. But from that point on, he just doesn't like me. Yeah. How can I handle this? Because then he told my manager that I have bad soft skills and stuff and so on. So now I was calm when I told him that there was flaws and so on, but he doesn't like me now. So right now the situation between me and him is like quite not very good. So.
Yeah, I understand that. I actually had a similar situation when I was much younger. One of the managers that I indirectly reported to wasn't okay with, and factually it was very related to the proposal that I had written that I referred to earlier, wasn't really okay with the idea that I was trying to change things, and it caused a situation in which I had to actually like go to lunch with HR and the manager and have a how can we resolve this conflict meeting. Anybody have this situation? Yeah, right? So I would say that if it ever escalates to that point, it's going to be really hard to recover from that socially. Just because you have a lot of like negative feelings built up. I will also say something that my husband told me, like, I think I was like maybe 20. You really will never be able to change somebody else. You can only change how you yourself react to what somebody's doing. So while I would love to tell you all the ways to get this person to be your friend again, the reality is that I mean, like you can take them out for a beer, you can take them out, you can do all these different things, and I would advocate that you try, right? I wouldn't give up. But I think the only thing I can tell you is to make your life better is to think about how you're responding to the way that he treats you, and try to not take it so personally. You probably hurt his feelings because he didn't think of it, right? And so that's not necessarily, I mean, I'm also not telling you not to tell people when you found something that's technically wrong. That's not it at all. In fact, you need to be able to be okay with that. But if the guy you're referring to was sitting here saying, well, I had this engineer tell me like something was wrong, I would say, again, you really have to figure out how you're going to respond when people come to you with these things, and decide how you yourself are going to react to it. I don't know what to tell you other than that. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're out of time.
Oh no!
So yeah.
I'm so sorry.
I'm
talked too
sorry
much.
too. So, thank you, Jen, for
Thank
your
you.
talk.
Thank you. Come ask me questions in the hallway, and I'll pass these out.